Good morning, students. Today we are taking up the last topic of Unit 1, that is micro and macroeconomics. It's been already mentioned that traditionally the subject matter of economics has been studied under two broad branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Let us understand in detail about microeconomics individually and macroeconomics separately. Now let us first take up microeconomics. Microeconomics is an analysis where we consider individual economic units, or in microeconomics we study the behavior of individual economic units. To give some examples, you can take households, firms, individual consumers, producer, price of a particular commodity, as well as the demand of an individual consumer, and so on. It is also called as price theory. Why? Because our main interest here is to understand how the prices of goods and services are determined in both commodity and factor market. We try to figure out how the prices and quantities of goods and services are determined through the interaction of the individuals in the market, and that is why it is called as price theory. Here we consider mainly about the partial equilibrium analysis. The method of study that is being used in microeconomic analysis is partial equilibrium analysis. Since we consider one small part of the economy, to give some example, here we study about equilibrium in one particular market and not all the units combined together. Here our concentration is on one particular unit at a time. Since we study about one single part at one particular point of time, we consider that analysis as partial equilibrium analysis. As I told you, as I already had given an example, here we study about the equilibrium in one single market. Whereas we compare with macroeconomics, there we consider general equilibrium analysis, but in microeconomics the method of study that is adopted is partial equilibrium analysis. The laws are formulated in microeconomics based on an assumption called as Ceteris Paribus. What is Ceteris Paribus? Other things being constant. Let us consider one example to have a better understanding. If we consider demand, demand is the quantity of the goods that is being purchased by a consumer in the market at a particular price and at a particular point of time. How demand is influenced, or demand is been influenced by many factors. It may be price of the good, prices of related goods, income of the consumer, his taste and preferences. But we do not consider all the factors together, rather we keep the rest of the other factors constant. We see what happens to demand when there is a change in price. When the price changes, how the demand changes, that factors we consider, keeping the rest of the other factors constant. How the demand get influenced by one single factor at that point of time is considered. So this is the assumption that is being made, that is Ceteris Paribus. Before formulating any laws, we, in the sense in microeconomics, an assumption is being made called as Ceteris Paribus. There are lot many other assumptions like laissez-faire policy, full employment and so on, which may not exist in reality, but to make our study simple, the laws are framed in microeconomics based on these assumptions. The assumptions are Ceteris Paribus, full employment, laissez-faire policy and so on. The most important theories that fall under the domain of microeconomics are the theory of consumer behavior, the theory of factor pricing, the theory of price determination, theory of economic welfare. So these are the most important theories that we come across microeconomic analysis. Now we shall understand macroeconomic analysis. In macroeconomic analysis, we study how the economy as a whole operates. That means we study all the units combined together. It mainly focuses on the aggregate measures. It doesn't speak about individual units. Rather, it takes the aggregates of the economy such as national income, that is nothing but total output, it may be general price level, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, unemployment, international trade, inflation. All these aggregate measures is being considered in macroeconomics. It mainly focuses on how these aggregate measures are determined and how they change over time. Macroeconomics especially, we consider, or it helps us in understanding various economic problems and economic relation at a aggregate level, or at the whole economy is taken into consideration. And the most important method of study that is adopted here is general equilibrium analysis. Here we do not consider the equilibrium of one market or one particular unit. Rather, the equilibrium of the economy as a whole is studied, and for which we call it as general equilibrium analysis. Macroeconomic analysis is also called as theory of income and employment, since it mainly focuses on how the income and employment levels are determined in the economy as a whole. The most important theories that we study in macroeconomics include theory of national income, theory of general price level, theory of employment, theory of economic welfare, and so on. Let us now consider the distinction between micro and macroeconomics, which you can expect for 2 marks in your final examination. As we already have taken a detailed explanation towards micro and macroeconomics, we can easily draw the distinction between micro and macroeconomics. The first and the foremost distinction that you can bring out between these two concepts or these two approaches are microeconomic studies about individual economic units like households, firms, individual consumers, individual producers, and so on. As far as macroeconomics is concerned, macroeconomics deals with the economy as a whole. It studies about the aggregates of the economy, not with the individual economic units. The second important distinction that you can take up is it deals with how consumers or producers make their decision based on their budget and very many other variables, how they make decisions at the individual level. Whereas if you consider macroeconomics, it deals with how different economic sectors, there are household sectors, there are industrial sector, there is government, and there is foreign or external sector, how these economic sectors make decision is being studied under macroeconomics. The third distinction that we can notice is that in microeconomics, it uses the method of study called as partial equilibrium analysis, whereas in macroeconomics, it uses the method of study for which we call it as general equilibrium analysis. In microeconomics, the laws are formulated based on the assumption of Ceteris Paribus, whereas in macroeconomics, the laws are formulated so that there is mutual interdependence between different economic variables. And the last and the most important distinction that we can notice is that microeconomic analysis is also called as price theories, whereas macroeconomic analysis is called as the theory of income and employment. The reason why microeconomics is called as price theory is already been noticed that in microeconomics, our main focus is on the determination of price, how the prices of goods and services are determined through the interaction of individuals in the market, both in commodity and factor market. As far as macroeconomics is concerned, the main focus, the main interest is on the determination of the level of income and employment of the economy as a whole. So these are the most important distinction that you can bring out between micro and macroeconomics, which will be your 2 marks question. You may have to give at least 4 such differences or distinction between micro and macroeconomics. Let us move forward with the second chapter, Theory of Consumer Behavior. Before having an introduction towards this chapter, let us take up the meaning of consumer behavior. As you know very well, students, a consumer is an economic agent who buy and consume goods and services to satisfy his wants or needs. So what is consumer behavior? How a consumer tends to behave while purchasing the goods and services in the market itself is known as consumer behavior. Here we endorse how an individual consumer behaves in the market. Since a consumer gets many products in the market, all the products are not priced at the same level and all the products do not give him same level of satisfaction. It creates difficulties to choose which product to purchase and which product to avoid. So it is a problem of choice that arises in the minds of consumer, that what are the goods that we need to purchase and at what price I need to buy, because everybody's income is not similar. All are not born rich. They need to see that out of the given income, how to make use of the given income to buy various goods and services. That is why in this chapter, consumer behavior, we tend to find how a consumer decides to buy the product, to purchase the product, at what quantities and at what price he is purchasing. Here we tend to understand 2 important things that I have written on the board: how a consumer buys different goods and services at different prices. And the second thing that we need to understand is how a consumer allocate income to purchase different goods. These are the 2 important things that we tend to understand, and at the end of the chapter we may able to answer to these questions. Let us consider an important analysis, that is utility analysis. What is utility? The first thing that comes to our mind when we take up the term utility is usefulness. But as far as economics is concerned, utility is not usefulness. Then what is utility is a question. The answer is want satisfying power of a commodity is called utility. Utility is nothing but a want satisfying power of a commodity. To give an example, if you like sweets and if you eat a chocolate, you derive utility by consuming or by eating a chocolate. That means that commodity is satisfying your want of having some sweet. So this capacity or this power of a commodity to satisfy a want of an individual is called as utility. So student, what is utility? Want satisfying power of a commodity is called utility. Some of the important features you need to understand to get rid of any misunderstanding or misinterpretation. So let us consider the features of utility. Utility is subjective. It is a subjective phenomenon. What does subjective refers to? It is very simple. Utility is not the same for each and every individual. It differs from one person to another person, and it also differs from place as well as time. Let us consider the same example of eating a chocolate. One person who likes sweet may derive some satisfaction level, may derive some utility by eating a chocolate, but the other person may not have liking towards having sweets. By then, when he consumes or when he eats chocolate, he may not derive any utility. Therefore, utility is a subjective phenomena which differs from one person to another, or which also differs from place as well as time. That is what we call it as utility is subjective. Then utility is not same as usefulness. It is already been learned and it is already been understood that utility is not similar to usefulness. Usefulness is a different concept and utility is a different concept. How? Let us take some other commodity to get a clear understanding. There are other products which are considered as harmful to the health, that is cigarette, alcohol, drug. A person who has the habit of smoking may derive some utility when he smokes a cigarette, but it is not an useful product. But when he consumes, when he smokes the cigarette, definitely some level of satisfaction or utility is being derived. Therefore, utility is not same as usefulness. Usefulness is a different concept and utility is a different concept. Then, utility is ethically neutral. From economics perspective, we do not distinguish as ethical and unethical. Utility do not consider whether the commodity is ethically holds or it is unethical, because just now I told that cigarette, alcohol and drugs are ethically, it is bad, it doesn't give any justification whether it is good or bad. It just considers whether it is giving some level of satisfaction to that consumer. Therefore, it is ethically neutral. Then utility is an anticipated satisfaction. We call utility as anticipated satisfaction. These are some of the important features that you have to keep in your mind, you have to consider when we come across the utility concept. Let us now consider the two important approaches of utility analysis. These are the two principles on which the theories are framed, the laws are formulated. Those are cardinal utility analysis and ordinal utility analysis. These are the two important analyses which helps us to formulate the theories. As far as cardinal utility analysis is concerned, the most important laws that are formulated are the law of diminishing marginal utility, the law of equi-marginal utility. As far as ordinal utility is concerned, we come across indifference curve and its mapping. Let us now consider the first and the foremost approach of utility analysis, and that is cardinal utility analysis. Cardinal utility analysis assumes that the level of utility can be expressed in terms of number. Under this analysis, we make an assumption that the utility can be expressed in terms of number. We can quantify the utility in terms of number like 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 and so on. There is no units of measurement of the utility derived from the commodity. It is just an assumption that we make in order to analyze that in cardinal utility we can quantify the utility derived from the consumption of a given amount of commodity. Let us consider that you are consuming for about 5 chocolates. By consuming the first unit, you derive some level of satisfaction. You can express that satisfaction level in terms of number. Maybe you can give it as 20. The level of satisfaction you derived is 20. And when you consume the second unit, of course, you do derive some level of satisfaction, and for that we can assign a number that is 15. Likewise, you can express the utility derived from the consumption of a commodity in terms of numbers, for which we call it as cardinal utility analysis. In this particular analysis, we come across the law of diminishing marginal utility and the law of equi-marginal utility. And the second important analysis is ordinal utility analysis. In this particular analysis, we cannot express the utility derived from the consumption of the commodity in terms of number. Rather, in this analysis, we can rank or give an order to the utility derived from the consumption of a commodity. When we rank the utility derived from the consumption of a commodity, we call that particular analysis as ordinal utility analysis. Since we can give an order to the particular utility that we derived. For example, you may eat chocolates, biscuits, or you may eat ice creams. Depending upon your preference, you can give the rank or order. You may give rank 1 for ice cream, rank 2 for chocolate, and the last rank for the biscuit. Likewise, according to the preferences of the consumer, we can give the rank or we can order the utility derived, for which we call it as ordinal utility analysis. In this analysis, we mainly come across indifference curve and its mapping. Now, let us consider the two important concepts of cardinal measurement. Those are total utility as well as marginal utility. Before understanding the law of diminishing marginal utility, you need to understand the meaning as well as formula to calculate total utility and marginal utility. Let us first take up total utility, which is expressed as TU. So, what is total utility? The total satisfaction derived from the consumption of the given amount of a commodity is called as total utility. To put it in other words, you can say that the sum of utility derived from all the units of the commodity consumed by a consumer is called as total utility. Let us consider that you are consuming 4 units of a commodity. Let us take an example of an ice cream. You are consuming or you are eating 4 ice cream. By consuming the first ice cream, you may derive the utility which can be numbered or which can be expressed in terms of number as 10. When you eat the second unit of the ice cream or second ice cream, you may derive some more utility, and that is utility of 5. Then when you eat the third ice cream, you still derive some utility which can be numbered as 4. When you eat the 4th unit of ice cream also, you derive some utility where we have numbered it as 1. By adding all this utility, by adding all the utilities derived from the consumption of this given commodity, we get total utility. That is, by adding 10 plus 5 plus 4 plus 1, we derive 20. So, the total utility here is 20. We have a formula to calculate total utility, which can be written as total utility is equal to the summation of marginal utility. When you add all the marginal utility derived from each unit of the commodity, we get total utility. Likewise, we need to look into another important concept, and that is marginal utility, which is represented as MU. What is marginal utility? The additional utility derived from the consumption of an additional unit of the commodity is called as marginal utility. You can also express as change in total utility due to the consumption of one additional unit of the commodity is called as marginal utility. By consuming one extra unit of a commodity, the level of utility derived or the additional utility derived itself is called as marginal utility. There are two formulas that you can adopt to calculate marginal utility, which I have written here. Just by subtracting the second last utility with the last utility, we get marginal utility. Therefore, MU is equal to TUN minus TUN minus 1. Another formula, either you can adopt this or the other one. The other formula that you can use to calculate marginal utility is MU is equal to delta TU by delta Q. That means change in total utility divided by change in quantities. You may not be very clear about marginal utility and total utility. Now, the example of a table or a schedule what I am taking gives you a clear understanding about how to derive total utility and marginal utility. Let us consider this schedule, student, where a consumer is consuming 4 units of a commodity. The commodity can be anything. It may be whichever you wish, you can assume. You can consider it as an ice cream or a chocolate or any other commodity which you like. Let us consider that a consumer is consuming 4 units of a commodity. Now, we have 2 schedule of total utility and marginal utility. By consuming the first unit of the commodity, the marginal utility derived or the utility derived from the consumption of this unit will be 20. By then total utility will also be 20. Now, by consuming the second unit of the commodity, the consumer derives the utility, that is 15. Whatever the addition, that is when he consumes the second unit, one additional unit, he gets the satisfaction level, that is 15. By adding 20 and 15, we derive 35. That is, total utility is the summation of all the utilities derived from consuming the given units of the commodity. By adding 20 with 15, we derive 35, which is the total utility. Likewise, when he consumes additional unit, that is the third unit, he derives the marginal utility of 10. By adding 35 with 10, we get 45, which is the total utility. Likewise, when he consumes the fourth unit, he derives the utility of 5, which is the marginal utility. By adding 45 plus 5, we derive 50, which is the total utility. So, the concerned formula is to be utilized in order to get total utility as well as marginal utility. So, to derive total utility, we need to take the summation of marginal utility. TU is equal to sum of MU. To derive marginal utility, we need to adopt TUN minus TUN minus 1 or delta TU divided by delta Q. Change in total utility divided by change in Q. Change in the units consumed. Let us consider numerical example to understand how to derive marginal utility. Just by subtracting last consumption with the second last consumption, we derive marginal utility. Let us consider that by consuming the fourth unit, he will get the utility of 50 and the second last consumption, that is 45, need to be subtracted. Let us consider that TUN, that is the last consumption, is 50 and the second last consumption is 45. Just by taking the difference, we get what? 5, which is the marginal utility. Likewise, we can also consider the other formula, that is delta TU by delta Q. Just by taking the changes, 50 minus 45 by 4 minus 3, that is 5 divided by 1 gives you 5. Here we are taking the differences of change in total utility, that is 50 minus 45 divided by change in quantity, that is 4 minus 3. Just by subtracting 50 minus 45, we get 5. By subtracting 4 minus 3, we get 1. By dividing 5 by 1, we derive 5, which is the marginal utility. I believe you all have understood about how to calculate total utility and marginal utility by making use of the concerned formula. Now, let us take up assignment questions from whatever the topics that we have understood today. The first question that you need to answer is distinguish between micro and macro economics. I have given 5 distinctions in my explanation. You can quote any 4 points so that you can grab 2 marks in your examination. The second question is, what do you mean by cardinal utility analysis? This will be asked as 1 marks question. And the third question is, what is utility? This is 1 mark question. From the topics that we have considered for today, I have given 3 questions, so you need to write this as an assignment. You need to upload it to the link, or you need to maintain a notes, and whenever the classes begins, you can bring it and you can get the correction done. Bye.